Survey's massacre. Their sacrifices and legacy continue to inform our spirit and guide our work. So before we introduce today's wonderful panelists, I want to let you know that I am Zakir Naya Muhammad, and I am a childhood eye cancer, and I have eye cancer in my right eye. So that means I cannot see you in my right eye. It is a fake prosthetic glass eye. And as a result of the cancer, I'm also hard of hearing. So I have a hearing aid that is currently malfunctioning at the moment. So I am an African-American woman. And for those who are blind and low vision, I am wearing a head wrap with polka dot glasses, black glasses, white shirt, and a polka dot flowy skirt. So first, we're going to go ahead and introduce one of the panelists, Alana Vanza, and she's the founder and CEO of Empower MS. So it's a digital wellness company supporting people living with multiple sclerosis. And after years of navigating chronic pain, medical gaslighting, and inconclusive tests, Alana was diagnosed with MS in 2019. So that experience transformed her into a fierce advocate for health advocacy and equity and patient-centered care. And she now combines her personal insight and professional expertise to build tools that support wellness, self-advocacy, and community for those living with all kinds of autoimmune conditions. And just use your voice right now and tell us what you're wearing.
So I am wearing a black dress and gold shoes.
Great, simple. So next we'll also have soon-to-be Dr. Anthony Cherry. He's an inspiring individual and a leader in both education and advocacy. Cherry is profoundly hard of hearing in both ears, mainly the left ear, and has focused his Ph.D. studies at Oklahoma State University on the American West and War Society. He teaches history and he teaches history at Holland Hall School and contributes his expertise as a board member to Tri-City Collective and is a media correspondent for Focus Black Oklahoma. So what are you wearing? Use your voice right now. Tell us what you're wearing.
I'm wearing a green knit short sleeve shirt, some gray pants, and some Air Max 270s.
Great. Okay, so today's conversation is going to center around the intersectionality of disability, identity, the importance of creating a more inclusive and equitable workforce. And because July is Disability Pride Month, Disability Pride Month is also acknowledging the 35th anniversary of the American Disabilities Act. And it affects disabilities. There's 1 in 4 people in the U.S. that has a disability. And so we're having this conversation today. And any questions you do have, be sure to hold them to the end. But we definitely want you to ask questions. So the first... by the way, we're having a conversation and we're not medical doctors. So just know that those medical questions are not going to be answered by us. You can go to Google, go to WebMD, go to ChatGPT for those questions. Okay. So to get started, I want each of you to tell us about your diagnosis. Tell us about what that experience was like that really shaped your personal and professional path. So we'll start with Alana.
So it actually took me around 6 years to be diagnosed with MS. I had all sorts of random symptoms and I was going to, all of these specialists and they kept telling me nothing's wrong. The tests kept coming back inconclusive until finally I completely lost feeling in my lower body. I was not able to walk and I ended up in the emergency room. And so even when I was in the emergency room, the medical doctor didn't take me seriously. I had to really use my voice and advocate for myself to get the testing that I needed. And thankfully, I was able to get an MRI of my brain and my spine and discovered that I had MS. And actually, I got the test results before I had a chance to talk to a neurologist. And so I'm like Googling, what does it mean, demyelination? And so actually Google diagnosed me with multiple sclerosis. So very traumatic.
Dr. Cherry?
Well, one of my earliest memories is a very painful fever. I was in the bathtub. I had to be 5 or 6 maybe. And I remember my parents just dumping bags of ice into the bathtub to keep my temperature down. And little did I know that would affect me a few years later because, I remember my grandmother yelling at the bottom of the steps, Anthony, come down here. She thought I was ignoring her, and then she'd come upstairs with a switch and just start surprised. But then a school teacher, I guess in 3rd grade, recalled calling my name several times and me not responding. And instead of punishing me like most teachers did, she referred me to a specialist.
So I'm gonna interject occasionally, because we're having a group conversation, and I'll share that my cancer is called retinoblastoma. It's predominantly caught in children under the age of 13. So my diagnosis was officially when I was 6 months old, at the 6-month-old checkup. My mom had taken a picture of me 3 months earlier, and she saw a white glow instead of a red glow that you normally see back in the day of that flash. And so she took it to more than one doctor, because the first doctor was like, don't worry about it, you're just nervous. And she was like, no, I need a second opinion. And because she was adamant about the second opinion, she was able to take it to a doctor that recognized retinoblastoma and said that I needed to have surgery right away. So that's why I have surgery in my right eye. And since I was not even 1 year old, I've been wearing a prosthetic eye in my right eye. And more of those stories are shared in the book. My mom and I wrote it together. She was writing journals for the first 18 years of my life. And so we kind of put that together as like a mother-daughter conversation. So that's how I ended up building my brand, as seeing life from a different lens, or seeing life through a different lens, which is the name of the book. So going on to the next question. All of you now have lived life and you're entrepreneurs, you're working the 9 to 5, you're side hustling. But how did your diagnosis then start to change the way you think about your identity and the way that you utilize that as you approach your work? We'll start with Dr. Cherry.
Well, I just remember early in life, I was very insecure about my disability. I didn't want anyone to know that I couldn't hear. I wouldn't wear the expensive hearing aids my parents bought. I would lose them. Sometimes subconsciously, I think I lost them on purpose. I don't know. I hope my mother doesn't hear that part, because those were very expensive. And, I just wanted to be normal. I wanted to be thought of as normal. So, I thought less of myself for a very long time. But, after a while, I realized that the hearing aids were just a tool, and it had nothing to do with who I am. It's just it's how God made me, and I'm very, very happy with the way that God made me. And, I still strive to be better, strive to be a professional where my disability doesn't put up obstacles, but rather it builds bridges and helps me make connections.
I love that. I think for me, the change in my identity started when I was going through the diagnostic process and was being gaslit by doctors and even people who were in my life, kind of, to look at me. I quote unquote, like you said, I looked normal, but I had all of these things going on. And so I started to doubt myself, doubt my own knowledge and body wisdom. And I think for a long time after diagnosis, that really affected me, both emotionally, but also just it affected the way that I saw myself. And I'll be perfectly honest, it hasn't been until recently that I've considered myself disabled. And I think I really struggle with that label. One, because we know that society puts stigma on that term, but also I struggle with what it means for me and for my life and for my future too. As someone who is still of working age, discovering that I can no longer work in the same ways that I used to has been really difficult. And we kind of talked a little bit earlier about there's some grief in that. And grief, as we know, is a process. It's never done. It's cyclical. And so in the beginning, I was in denial, trying to prove, everybody wrong, that just because I have this chronic disease doesn't mean that I can't do what I used to do before. But now I realize that having this chronic disease means that I just have to work in different ways, that some of the behaviors and the practices that I engaged in before are no longer sustainable. And it's not necessarily a loss, it's an evolution. And so I try to focus on that rather than on what I'm missing, I think.
I've loved everything that you both mentioned, and it led me to a question that I just thought of. So in between you working and building your apps, you have these doctor appointments. So let's talk about what those doctor appointments are like. Are you still being gaslit medically?
What kind of appointments are you saying?
The doctor appointments that you go to.
Yeah.
Are you still being gaslit medically?
Yeah. At first, my family thought I was faking it. They thought I was faking the hearing disability, just ignoring them, and just, you know. Then they scheduled some audiologist appointments for me, and I went to those just really nervous, and I had no idea that there was something different until they told me. They sat down and did all these tests. They put test on the bone behind my ear. They did a cochlear test, and then finally I had to come to grips with that I do have a disability. And it's something I'm still working on overcoming, but yeah, it's definitely a process. It's like the grief process that you brought up. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So my medical experience since my diagnosis has been, there's been very positive experiences with providers who are attentive, who listen, who validate. But also, to be perfectly honest, I'm still experiencing medical gaslighting and being dismissed. And unfortunately, I think that my experience is not unique. And talking to other women specifically with chronic illnesses, autoimmune conditions, because it's a lot of times you're not physically able to see what's going on internally. There is a tendency to dismiss us when we go into our providers or when we, share changes in our symptoms and things like that. And I had an experience recently where I had an MRI. I have them done like every 6 months of my brain and my spine, and it showed progression. And I reached out to, first of all, I had to reach out to my neurologist once the test results came back in to say, okay, what does this mean? And I got a message from his nurse basically saying, well, you'll have to schedule an appointment with the doctor, and the appointment wasn't for 3 months. So in that interim, I'm, doing what you said earlier, like I'm going on Google, I'm asking ChatGPT, what does it mean? And I'm experiencing new physical symptoms like numbness again in my legs. And so I think that the medical system in general has a lot of work that it needs to do, not just in diagnosing chronic illnesses, but in introducing empathy and creating systems that allow for a smooth flow of medical attention when things are progressing, specifically in these illnesses. Because I talk to women all the time who have been just like newly diagnosed, and we know how traumatic that is, and then they don't have an appointment for 6 months. So what are you supposed to do in that time? How are you supposed to process that information? And so it is challenging. And I think one of my things has been, and what I try to do with Empower MS, is like, how do I help women advocate for themselves in these situations? How do I give them the language to say, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I need? And how do we hold these medical providers to task to give them better care?
Yeah, I think that's, a profound thing to have to deal with as someone with MS. And you remind me of an instance as someone with a hearing disability. It makes you really vet the people that you allow to test you and provide you with hearing aids. I had an experience as a younger man, a young teacher, where I finally had a little bit of money where I could buy my own hearing aids. I did some shopping around, and I found a hearing aid salesman instead of an audiologist. I mean, I had to learn very painfully and expensively that there is a difference between a salesperson and an audiologist. I remember I went to Cleartone, and they sold me the most expensive garbage hearing aids that were worthless. And they were little tiny in the ear hearing aids, and I still struggled. But then later I was able to go to a real audiologist who, was able to give me programmed hearing aids and help me understand that I got ripped off. So that happens a lot.
Mm-hmm. And mental health is very important as well as you're going through all of this. So what are some of the tools that you are using, or the types of community you're leaning on when you're going through these mental health challenges, dealing with all of this?
So I think for me, in the beginning, like I said, I was in denial. And so I really tried to navigate it on my own. And I didn't really share. Of course, my mom and my close friends knew, but I didn't really share beyond that because there was honestly just a little bit of shame with it. I knew that I hadn't done anything wrong. But again, there's a stigma with disabilities. And it was actually one of my former students. So I used to be an educator in Chicago, and one of my former students reached out to me on Facebook, and she had just left the hospital. She had just been diagnosed, and she saw a post that I, like literally one of the first posts where I publicly said I have MS. And in our conversation, I really realized, like, as much as she kind of needed me and the guidance that I provided based on what I had been through in my journey, I really needed her as well. And she actually inspired Empower MS, because in that conversation, it was so freeing to be able to talk about all the things that I don't share with my friends and family, because I don't want them to worry about me, and I don't want them to, I don't want the pitying looks and all those sort of things. And it was really affirming and validating to be able to share that with somebody else who gets it. And so I think that community like Empower MS and other communities where you can share the good, the bad, and the ugly are so important, because navigating it in general is challenging, but trying to do it alone is just it's too difficult.
Yeah, one of the biggest things I dealt with, I guess we're being pretty vulnerable here right now if we're talking about mental health, and hopefully someone relates to this, but I dealt with quite a bit of loneliness, not being able to hear conversations. I'd be in a room full of people, but not know what the conversation's about, just smiling and nodding my head, pretending like I'm, part of it, So a little shame, trying to avoid certain situations that are groups or parties or dinners. I would always try to avoid them because I didn't want to look stupid or be embarrassed, or someone make a joke and then I didn't get it, or so those things have changed because I found people that accept me for who I am, and they understand. And some people even learning sign language. I have friends who are, they understand what ear that I hear best out, and they go out of their way to sit close to me on that side. So I hope no one really thinks that they're alone in this, because there are people that are going through what we go through or are very empathetic about it as well. So, yeah.
And I also do want to add that, as we were talking about earlier, like, I do think there is a grieving process that happens when you are diagnosed with any kind of life-changing illness or disability. And I do also recommend therapy, because as you are dealing with changes in your life and changes to your relationships, changes to your ability to work, it is helpful not only to have a community who understands what you're going through, but to have a professional to help you work through that. Because, I, along with a lot of other women that I talk to, experience depression and things like that. And it really helps to have someone who is able to hold space for you in that way as you are navigating the ups and downs of just living life with a chronic illness.
And then I wanted to interject to add that because my story is a bit different, that I was too young to advocate for myself before I even knew what the word advocacy was. I'm thankful for my mom and my dad who were able to do that. So back in the 90s, it wasn't necessarily Facebook groups because the internet was just kind of getting started. But a lot of the time my mom would then ask, well, actually, she would hang out at the hospital. The hospital was the first Facebook group. The other parents that are going through the same thing. The other parents that don't know what to do. And so the parents that have been through it already are talking to each other. So before the Facebook groups, the hospitals still can be your source of community. And I wanted to mention a therapy tool that I have used in the past called Open Path Collective. So there's a few resources out there for those who are just getting started or want to help other people. And so what are some of the pivotal moments that help you to find the strength to face the challenges?
Like I mentioned, having the conversation with my former student was the pivotal moment, because I think that's when I talking about the grieving process, that's when I moved to acceptance. Like, this is something that, I have, that I'm dealing with, and what can I do with my new reality? I also, and I know a lot of us are done talking about COVID. We're tired of hearing about it, but I want to say, for me specifically, as it comes to navigating workplace accommodations, COVID really did change my life in a lot of ways. I was an educator at that time as well, and working remotely because I was no longer able to work in person. And I think, educators got a lot of bad rap during that time. But what I saw and what my experience was really that most of the administrators and districts that I worked with were really trying to be more inclusive. How do we create more inclusive environments for all students? And I think those discussions are still lingering. And I think that really opened up a conversation about, like, how can we help all students, all people thrive in the environments that they're in, not necessarily how can we provide accommodations that will make this work in this particular context. And so I think that was a pivotal moment for me, both professionally but also personally, because it helped me rethink my relationship to work, and realizing that the hustle culture that I had adopted and the addiction to urgency and all these sort of things was no longer sustainable for my health. And it helped me really recreate my days, design my schedule to maximize, like, my rest time and my body awareness and things like that. And so, I appreciate the opportunity to really slow down and to prioritize my health in that moment. And those are practices that I carry on to this day.
Yeah, I would say the moment for me, I would say, was my freshman year in college. My parents were very invested in making sure that I had everything I needed. And there was a clinic in Memphis, Tennessee called the Shea Clinic. And the Shea Clinic specializes in, profound hearing disabilities. And while I was there, I got a bunch of tests, some of the same old tests I was always getting. But when I left, they told me I was a candidate for a cochlear implant.
What is that?
A cochlear implant is it's neurosurgery where they kind of cut a hole in your skull and they insert a device, and it's there, right? And at that moment, I'm sure it works for quite a few people, but for me, that just sounded very horrible. To just jam a device in my brain, and I decided I'm good. I'm good how I am. I don't think I need neurosurgery. I don't think I want to be butchered. I'll learn sign language. I'll do whatever it takes to be employable and a productive person. And that was the turning point for me.
And let's see, I could answer that question too. So it became pivotal for me. We kind of briefly talked about it, of being able to advocate for yourself. So my story started pretty much in middle school. That's the age where puberty is hitting everyone, and you want to bully because you can, right? So a lot of time the bullying that happened to me was, remember the joke of 4 eyes because I wear glasses, but instead I would joke back with them and say, I'm actually 3 eyes because I can't see you in 1 eye. So being able to, deflect kind of in a positive, light humor way of, just because that I am different from you, this is actually my superpower, and what are you going to do about it in that way? So it happened for me in middle school, where I could confidently say, I am a survivor of this childhood eye cancer survivor. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it, as a superpower. I collect comic books, and I love that. And I would just remember I wouldn't be where I am today professionally if, who knows where I'd be, because it was vocational rehab who paid for my first degree. Without this hearing disability, I wouldn't have gotten a free education. Mm-hmm. So a lot of interesting things came out of this struggle.
And I want to piggyback on that too, because we were kind of talking earlier about, like, of course, it's life changing and devastating when you are diagnosed with something like MS, but also there have been some really beautiful things that have come out of the diagnosis. I feel like I found my voice in a lot of ways. I've connected with some amazing people. I've started a business, which never thought that I would be a health tech founder, and been really able to transform my hardship or this challenge really into a way to support and help other people. And I think, I try to focus on that. I think I try to really stay in gratitude by all of the blessings that I still have in my life. I try to not focus on lack, and I try to share that as well, because if I get stuck in that, it can be really disheartening. But I wouldn't be here, I wouldn't be able to share my message, and I wouldn't be able to touch other people if I wouldn't have been diagnosed. And I think that I would have continued to push myself and burn out, and it could have been a lot worse if I wouldn't have been diagnosed when I was and started to change the trajectory of my life and my health at the time I did.
Yeah, and I think it's made me a more empathetic teacher, a more effective teacher, knowing how hard it is for me to do well in certain environments. What are my students going through that? I remember I worked at Nimitz Middle School when it was open, and that was the hub for all of the blind students in Tulsa Public Schools. So here you have a deaf man teaching all the blind kids in the district, and it was really an empowering experience to see how hard it is for them to navigate life. And it just made me able to connect better with other people who were suffering with their own struggles.
So for those who may be newly diagnosed, or they have an advocate for them, like a parent or a guardian, what are your tips for those who need to get over the hub of telling their story for the first time?
That's a great question. I would say not to try to rush the healing process. I think understanding that it can be devastating, I think, and giving yourself time to process that is so important, because those feelings of anger, fear, uncertainty don't necessarily go away. And so if you pretend like they're not happening, you're trying to rush and prove that you're okay, I think you miss out on a lot of what's ultimately going to help you heal, and that's coming to terms with your new reality. And so I would say give yourself time, give yourself grace, be kind to yourself. I think it's super important to focus on prioritizing your health at that time, whatever that means, mental, physical, etc. And just really surround yourself with people who are supportive and who are not going to rush you because of their discomfort to kind of be or do something different.
Yeah, me personally, I have a very strong connection with my creator, and I believe my creator has given me a purpose here. Am I clear on it? No, not all the time, but I do believe he's given me everything I need to accomplish this purpose, and that includes training and experiences and struggles and victories that I can share with other people along the way. So I'm up for the challenges. I'm up for the victories as well, because it's all part of the plan, I think.
So there were a lot of people that were in my corner when it came to just navigating throughout school. I had what they call an individualized education plan, or IEP, which means that I could have a speech therapist so that I can confidently speak to you today. And I also had guidance counselors that were there to make sure that I can be the one to sit in front, so that I can both see and hear and adapt to everything of what the teachers are talking about. And then I had to carry that skill set on, even when I entered the entrepreneurship and workspace era, to once I got past HR, because I think the one thing that most people don't talk about is you don't want to tell HR about your disability. So once I knew I got the job I signed all the onboarding documents, then I said, "Hi, I am hard of hearing. I'm visually impaired. I need this. I need that. I need the other." Then they can't really say anything about it. They're like, "Okay, we'll see what we can do." But have you had that experience of you make it past the job or get into that first networking event, making it past that first pitch, and then you share your disability?
Yeah, my first few years teaching, I didn't have hearing aids. I couldn't. I didn't have I was breaking up a fight one day in the hall, and they came out and got stomped and destroyed. So I went a significant amount of time without hearing aids, and I went to the teachers union for help. I went to my administrator for help. I went to several people for help. Nobody really was, inclined to help me. Until I reached out to someone named Ava Hicks. She was administrator at the ESC, and then Dr. Pauline Harris. She was in charge of civil rights at the district. She finally, called me and asked for documentation. I gave it to her. And then for the next 7 years at TPS, I had my own personal assistant, my own personal teaching assistant that was with me, a second pair of ears. It was amazing. But I ended up leaving the district because they threatened to take that from me. And I did leave the district for that reason. But I did go to a place that they seemed to value me. They bought me this pair of hearing aids, a brand new pair of hearing aids. They've also paid for a few other things to help me get the accommodations I need. So there have been some pretty bad experiences with the Americans with Disabilities Act, and some others where people ignore it, and some where people go out of their way to make sure you have what they need.
I know from my research and what I've heard from other people with MS, like disclosure is a huge thing that people are concerned about when it comes to when to tell, what to share, and who to share it with in the workplace. I'm a little bit different because after I was diagnosed, as I mentioned, I started a remote job, and I'm really grateful for that company because regardless of, I don't even remember when I disclosed or if I disclosed early on that I had MS, but in general, that environment was very inclusive and very focused on giving everybody what they needed to thrive. So there was never a moment in that particular position where I felt like I didn't have what I needed to do my job and to do it well. And as my MS started progressing throughout that position, as I had more needs, I had built a relationship with my direct supervisor and with HR. I felt confident in communicating what I needed. And even sometimes they would proactively ask me, hey, what do you need? What do you need? So I worked in that position for about 2 years, and then my MS progressed to a point where I can no longer work in that role. And it was another grieving process because I love the organization, I love the role, but I realized that what the job required, I could no longer do anymore. But I think them kind of being a safe space for me helped me when I then went on to start my own business, think about, okay, how do I need to organize my days so that I can do the work to the best of my ability, but also giving myself time for rest, giving myself time for, days where I might not be doing well, where I can't get out of bed, where I'm, dealing with a lot of pain. And I really feel like that organization really set the tone for that for me. And I would say, everybody is different, obviously. And so, unfortunately, there are companies out there that will be discriminatory, even though it's illegal, or will make you feel some type of way for advocating for what you need. But as you mentioned, find you some advocates in whatever space that you're in or in any external organizations who can help you navigate that, because it is their responsibility to support you in doing the job in a way that works best for you. So, yeah.
So we are talking about this in the month of July, which I did mention is the 35th anniversary of the American Disabilities Act. But we are also in a time frame where this bill called the Big Beautiful Bill is about to change everybody's lives. And a lot of it does have to do with the funding that people can get to be able to easily have these resources at HR, at the school, at the job, even for entrepreneurship. So at this time, I know there's more research that needs to be done as far as how it's going to continuously affect. But the biggest thing is a lot of those who are disabled depend heavily on Medicaid and Medicare for the things that they need and for the doctor appointment that they need to go to for the regular checkup. So how are you feeling about all of this?
Oh, I'm very worried. I'm very concerned. I've had opportunities, like I mentioned before. It was Social Security that paid for my school, so I could be employable. I would not be employable without very powerful support, hearing aids, expensive technology. So I'm worried about a generation of young people who struggle with disabilities who will be going into a ever shrinking workforce with less support.
I mean, I'm terrified. Like, full disclosure, I'm on Medicaid. And so I'm constantly worried about whether my health care is going to be eliminated, what I'm going to do. My current MS medication without Medicaid is $75,000 a month. And so, I'm in a position where I am doing what I'm passionate about, but I'm not getting rich off of Empower MS. And so it's something that I think about daily, all day, honestly. And I'm in the process of navigating Social Security disability applications, and it's been dehumanizing, to be perfectly honest. And I thank God that I am in a position to advocate for myself, that I understand certain laws, and that I am not quiet about getting what I deserve. But I really feel lots of compassion and lots of sorrow for people who aren't in that position, because even just navigating the interview processes and having to get different examinations recently, and I'll be perfectly honest, recently I was scheduled to get a medical examination, and the private contractor working with Social Security changed my appointment from Tulsa to Sapulpa. And I'm thinking about, I have transportation, I have access to that, but there are so many people, vulnerable people, who are not in a position to make that drive. And she didn't even show up, so I'm really irritated about that. But I think these are the daily realities of people who are on Medicaid, Medicare, navigating the Social Security system, and even with the cuts to funding, cuts to support workers. Like, it is nearly impossible to get a hold of somebody. One time I called as soon as the office opened, and they were literally like, there's like 500 minutes before somebody will call you back. And then they called me back, and immediately the phone hung up. And so you think about like all of these barriers to access right now. I can't imagine what it's going to look like in the future. But I will say that there are a lot of organizations specifically for MS that are trying to fill those gaps. And I've been having conversations with them, but the first thing they tell me is, we don't have any money. Their funding is getting cut too. So it's challenging. It's just challenging is what I can say.
So for Disability Pride Month, there is a flag that was created by a graphic designer. And in that flag, you'll see it when you Google it basically, but it has about 5 different colors. And so the colors are different for different kinds of disabilities. One of them, the red, it represents physical disability. The gold represents neurodiversity. Think of autism, and invisible disabilities is white, invisible or undiagnosed. Blue represents psychiatric disabilities and mental illness. And green represents sensory disabilities, such as blindness, such as deafness. And so my question for you all is, what have you learned about others with other types of disabilities?
I've learned a lot just sitting here, like, listening to you two, because they call MS the invisible illness. So I guess we would fall under the invisible disabilities. And I think that, you know, a lot of time when you're dealing with something that's so heavy, you can get stuck in your own lane. And it's just been really enlightening to kind of talk to you two about what you're experiencing. And I would say for anybody who is struggling or navigating life with any disability, I think there's a lot of benefit to reaching out and building community with other people as well, because even though the challenges may be different, I think we all face some common obstacles, and I think allyship and community is so important.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to my experience at Nimitz Middle School working with the students who had visual impairments. And not just that, but that school, 40% of all the students were an IEP or a 504, an individualized education plan, or a plan for someone with one of these disabilities that you mentioned. That's I'm gonna say it's more than 40. It was almost half. And daily you're dealing with people who are struggling just to comprehend what you're trying to tell them, or they're struggling with some type of issue. But back to the blind students, I realized how unique their struggle is. They have to learn how to use canes. They have to count steps to get to the bathroom, count steps to get to their locker. It is a very challenging way to live life. And I appreciate the fact that you had us describe what we're wearing to our audience. Thank you.
My experience over the past maybe 2 decades of I've been blessed to be around others that are visually impaired. And then I've also been blessed to be around others who also have a physical disability that also affect their vision. And so it also does go back to that communication, that empathy, because, I can walk, I can see just fine in the daylight, but there are a lot of people who cannot. So I remember there's 2 instances where there are some who are completely blind, and they depend heavily on the white cane that has a red bottom at the top and a little knob that lets them know whether they're bumping into something or not. Now, there's such thing as programs that are also getting funded by the government called vocational rehab programs. And this really helped them to navigate, cross streets, get into Uber, things of that sort. But every chance that I get, because I had this opportunity, one, to be a summer camp counselor with others who are visually impaired or completely blind, is to ask them if they need help. And nowadays a lot of them are resistant because they're not used to it, right? But I remember getting that experience of asking them if they need help, and then I am the one who is what's called their sighted guide. That means grabbing onto their they will grab onto your right arm and walk with you. And anyone who would automatically make assumptions like, oh, is that your boo? No, I'm helping them to walk across the street. So it's things like that of making sure that people don't automatically assume and make assumptions, but also being able to advocate, but also being able to be empathetic. So that we got a long way to go for that, but there's resources and places and people out there that do need the help, and maybe hesitant at first because this world does not easily help people. But
I think you brought up such a huge thing, is like the concept of help is so important. And I think for me, it's been so challenging to ask for help, to ask for what I need. And a lot of that is like, going back to trying to pretend like I'm okay and, push through culture and all these sort of things. And like literally, I had to really be down bad before I would say, okay, I need help. And I think I just want to, for anybody watching, to normalize that it's okay, one, to not be okay. I think it's also okay to ask for help, and to also not know what type of help you need. Because I realized for myself that I may think I need a particular type of help, and a friend checks in and asks me, can I bring you over some food? That may not have been in my frame of mind at that time, but that is help that I needed in that moment. And so I think that there is no shame in asking for help. Going back to our communication about community, it is impossible to navigate life alone, but especially if you're living with a disability. And so I think Sometimes if you're somebody who's fiercely independent and used to doing things by yourself, it can be challenging and intimidating and a little bit of shame associated with that. But you can start small. Like sometimes I would just, like ask for small things from safe people, and realizing that the world wasn't going to end if I let people know that I wasn't okay, I think has made it a lot easier. I still struggle, but I think, normalizing that is so important for sure.
Yeah, you brought up something earlier that really made me think a lot about the uncertainty of the big beautiful bill and what it will bring. And you also said something that made me think about uncertainty, like your debilitating condition and what employment looks like for you in the future. My hearing is deteriorating, and my audiologists say I may possibly be deaf. So there is some uncertainty that we're all dealing with here. And I guess for me, it's just embracing that uncertainty and knowing that we're going to, whatever it takes, we're going to advocate when the time comes.
So you both, or we all, are doing so many amazing things. So why don't you tell us what you have going on and how people can continue to help you?
Awesome. So Empower MS is a wellness company for women with multiple sclerosis, and our focus really is on everything beyond the physical symptoms of MS. So there are so many organizations that focus on physical health, but that does not take into the account all the ways that MS really affects your entire life, from your relationships, your mental health, the way that you work. And so we wanted to be a holistic organization to support women in navigating those changes and advocating for themselves. So right now we are working on, we have a 12-week program called the Rooted and Resilient program. It's a mindfulness for people with MS and chronic pain. And essentially we want to help people, one, deal with the chronic pain of MS, but also navigate the challenges that come from the daily life of living with multiple sclerosis as well. So in that, you'll learn how to communicate boundaries, how to ask for help, how to advocate for yourself with your healthcare providers. I also have recently partnered with Dr. Brandy Archie of Ask Sammy, and we have come together to create an adaptive tools collection for people with MS. So different tools that people can use in their day-to-day lives, like mobility aids, or various pillows that you can use to sleep a little bit more soundly, and so that can be accessed through my website, www.empowerms.co.co/tools. So those are some things I'm really excited about.
You got a lot going on. Okay, so you're about to be a Dr. Anthony Cherry. What's that about?
Well, I'm just blessed to have opportunities that have sparked from the original one, where I lost my hearing, and vocational rehabilitation got me started on my path of education, my first free degree. Then I thought, I'm not going to pay for my master's, and I found a way to get a free master's, and now here I am I'm not paying a dime for a Ph.D. It all started with vocational rehabilitation. And the fact that the big beautiful bill is taking these opportunities from people to build very meaningful lives and meaningful careers is really disheartening.
But you're also the project lead for the Real Talk Conversations. So what's coming up next for Real Talk?
I just want to say Richard Glisson and Bracken Clark, they are the real brains and brawn behind this. Jamie Glisson, they make everything looks so beautiful up here. It's a team effort. It's collective.
So we're getting ready to open up for questions, and before we do that, so you can find me online at Zakir Nayar. Zakir is Arabic for the hereafter, the afterlife. Nayar is my middle name. It's Arabic for bright light. What I didn't realize until I did a speaking engagement, like in the middle of the pandemic, someone asked me a question and said, you realize that your middle name literally projected your life? And I'm like, I had no idea, but now we're rolling with it. So Seeing Life Through a Different Lens is the book. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it on my website. You can find it on Audible. I am also understanding that we need some in real life communities, and I'm actually having people make a little exodus if they want to go to the continent of Africa if they want to. I've been that's a whole nother conversation of what it's like traveling with a disability and what it's like traveling with a mother who has a physical disability. That's a conversation for a whole nother day. But you can also learn all about that at zakirnayar.com, ZAAKIRAHNAYYAR.com. So if you have questions, be sure to hold the microphone so we can see your lips, or we'll have if there's any question from online.
I actually, since you brought up the topic of traveling with a disability, I would actually like to hear you all talk about that.
Okay. Oh, well, where to start? So, the first thing I think I'll share is Uber and Lyft nowadays are doing good about asking you what kind of disability you have, so that can make sure that they put you in the right vehicle. Because definitely during the pandemic, when I was trying to travel with my parents who have physical disabilities, we had to keep rebooking vehicle because it was too small, and we asked for the biggest car, but that wasn't the one. So thank goodness apps are getting better about asking you ahead of time what kind of help do you need. Next is then the airlines. Now the airlines are doing a lot better about putting you to go before the first class, the people in first class. So airlines are now doing better, but if it doesn't already have a box in the form, you have to tell people. Usually you have to make sure that you go to the check-in line rather than you checking in online, because if they don't see you and let you have that conversation to tell them, it can be difficult. For the most part, I used to just let it slide and just, but then I'll be more tired by the end of my travel. Then I would blame it on I don't want to travel because of this, because of that. I'm going to struggle with this. I'm going to struggle with that. But the good thing now is if you now say, I cannot see, so I need to be able to navigate to the front, or I cannot hear and I need someone to take me to the plane, or we can walk, but we can't walk very far. So if the terminal is in the other side of cyberspace, please give us a wheelchair. So it's just now airline and train and public transportation travel is easier because there's now questions that ask. But for a very long time, I had to get the confidence to advocate for myself before I could even advocate for my parents who had physical disabilities. So
I would probably say the airport was probably the most anxious place, because they make announcements, they change flights and they change gates and they make an announcement. Even with hearing aids, I can't hear those things most of the time. So after missing a few flights, I've decided that I would go get pre-boarding. So I would get pre-boarding and I would walk up to the person, the flight attendant, and I would smile big at them and say, can you make sure that I get on my flight? And I would sit close. So it was an easy fix for a lot of anxiety.
So I actually haven't taken any flights since I quit my full-time job in 2021. And the reason that I quit that was because of the progression of my MS and because it involved so much travel. Even though it was a remote job, I was gone like 2 to 3 weeks out of every month during certain periods of time. And I would be so sick after those trips and so in so much pain, and just really, it wasn't worth it. And now the travel that I do has been, domestic, and I drive. I have 2 big dogs, so that, kind of impacts the way that I travel. But in terms of long road trips, because I drive between here and Illinois, it's going back to kind of recognizing what my body needs. And so I have pillows and things that I sit on, and different trigger point therapy tools really kind of to support me, because otherwise I'm just in pain and it's really hard to navigate. And I think taking multiple breaks on the trip there, it's about 10 hours, taking breaks every 2 hours to get out and stretch and deal with whatever numbness and pain is in my body has been key. But it's definitely, I do have some anxiety about eventually getting back on a plane, because I just don't, I don't know what that would look like. And I it's going back to the grieving process, like I used to be a nomad. I used to be in these international streets, here, there, and everywhere. And so that's a part of myself that I haven't been able to do. And so I struggle with that. But I'm planning on taking a birthday cruise. I'm going to set the intention. So Virgos, hey. So yeah.
Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for this conversation. It's been really enlightening, and I'm so glad to hear your stories. Alana, I heard you talk about that you had to advocate for yourself. What are some ways that all of you all had to advocate for getting what you all need, not only medically, but emotionally, physically, with friends or family? And then I'm an educator. And so what can I do as an educator to enlighten my younger students about disabilities that they might not even know that they have? Like, what's that conversation looking like without being disrespectful? Not only the younger kids, but also my adults, because I know I have called Dr. Cherry to, I had a teacher who was hard of hearing, and we ended up getting him hearing aids as well as hearing devices. But just, can you discuss some of those ways that we can advance the advocacy in the school?
Yeah. Oh, please.
Well, I was going to say the first step in being able to advocate for yourself for others is awareness, like being aware of what the needs are, but also what the resources are available. And I think for me, one of the ways that I had to advocate for myself, as I mentioned earlier, was just getting the testing that led to my diagnosis. And thankfully, like, my best friend works in the medical field, and I was in the emergency room kind of like telling her how the doctor was trying to dismiss me. And she knew, medical policies, legal policies, and she kind of gave me the language that got him moving. And so I think, like, learning, it's difficult to learn everything about every disability, but I think kind of learning what's available, what the specific needs are, because everybody's different, is key. And then if you're not aware of what the available resources are, finding somebody who is. So like you mentioned, reaching out to Dr. Cherry, I think finding a network of people who are well versed in various policies, resources, organizations. And again, like, I think having the language, and I'm a fan of like scripting. So what do you need to say to get results in certain situations can be so powerful. And that comes too from connecting with people who have had to have those conversations. Or, I'm not even gonna lie, like ChatGPT in some cases has been able to help me write a message to my neurologist that got results. So yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing you can do is print out a copy of the Americans with Disabilities Act and post it where people can see the actual language of what it says. And, I did go through the teachers union, but most industries do have professional organizations. And I think that's another way you can go through advocating, have a colleague advocate for you and with you. Yeah.
I wanted to mention a book that was recently published by a disability advocate by the name of Tiffany Yu, Tiffany, and the last name is YU. The name of the book is Anti-Ableist Manifesto, one of those. But in that book, she had excerpts from a lot of other disability advocates with all kinds of disabilities, and they have scripts in there. They have thoughtful journal style questions, and they have resources in that book as well. So it's available on Amazon, on Tiffany Yu's website as well as an audiobook for if you want to listen as well too.
I also kind of want to step back from that question and recognize that even if someone doesn't have a progressive illness or progressive disability, what they were able to do yesterday or even this morning might not be what they're able to do today. And so always checking in with someone about what their current needs are, I think is so powerful, because, making assumptions can lead you in the wrong direction. And I think really having those conversations about like what is pressing for you right now, what are your current needs, and how can I help you meet those, I think is a powerful way to start that conversation.
I have a couple questions from our YouTube stream to kind of piggyback on what we've been discussing. As what advice would you give someone with a disability, or as an ally of somebody with a disability that's trying to advocate for accommodations, but they're worried about being too difficult, or they're worried about bringing more attention to themselves? Is there, I know we've already talked about books and specific language recommendations, but just have to break out of your shell, like you can't be quiet anymore. Like, what would you say the best piece of advice is for that?
I think I'll touch on the accommodation part and kind of piggyback over, especially to the travel aspect. One thing that I've also needed to do is make sure that if it's going to be an Airbnb, it's going to be on the ground floor. And if it can't be on the ground floor, it has a ramp or a working elevator. Some hotels in other countries don't have that yet. And so that's a lot of times of hoping we can call ahead, because nowadays everyone wants to use AI and we can't even get the customer service to make sure, is this going to fulfill our needs? So a lot of it still goes back over to asking those questions. Ask the person with the disability, what do you need? But also making sure that the places that accommodate, can you actually accommodate? You're not just listing it and saying it, but do you actually accommodate? Do you have the pictures to prove it? So I can say that in the terms of accommodating, like making sure that it is actually going to be accommodating.
That question makes me think that there are people who are empathetic. There are also people who really don't care. And then there are also people who are going to try and make your life harder to amuse themselves or for whatever reason. So that person who's worried about being too difficult or ruffling feathers, they're going to have to get over it. It did get to the point for myself where I had to walk away from a position because I wasn't getting what I needed. So it may come to that. Yeah.
I think for me, it's kind of like, what's the alternative of not speaking up? Like, are you prepared to live with the consequences of not having what you need, or actively, in my case, if I don't advocate for myself, it can mean that my illness progresses in a way that's not good for me. And also, I think I want to, I have a background in psychology, so I'm always thinking about how you can reframe it. I try to walk into situations assuming that people want to support me. Now, people can prove me wrong, but I think if you go into those situations thinking that you have to have a battle and you have to, it's going to be contentious, I think maybe some of that energy might be coming through. But assuming that this person wants to support you until they prove you otherwise, I think might put you in a little bit of a different mental space, and help you prepare for those questions a little bit, or those conversations a little bit differently.
That assuming the best. Yeah. I like that. It's not always easy.
Right.
I have a couple more. How can organizations go beyond ADA compliance to build truly accessible and empowering work environments, but beyond just posting posters and such? Do you think that focus groups are a good place to start? Or like, I think they might be referring more to like the little things, not just the broad sweeping, posting posters and making sure there's accessible walkways and such, but something that maybe would be very accommodating or helpful that isn't often thought of.
I still also think there's still a lot of conferences that are still going on, even if they're virtual, that are both for disability and for allies. There's one organization Johnson has a conference that they organize where it's for both those who are disabled and those who are in the medical field, who are policymakers, and who can make the decision. So it is a little bit more of go back to those Facebook groups, be a listener in the Facebook groups as well as attend the conferences and focus groups. I'm always wary about them because it's like, what are you actually going to do with the information? That's just me. But if there are conferences that and communities that come together with people who are decision makers, both on the ally side and the disability side, that tends to be the most effective.
And on a smaller scale, if they're not able to get to conferences, I think there can be a lot of benefit in having learning sessions. Like, I was an educator for 10 years and I never had a professional development about disability in the workplace or accommodations or any of the things that we've been talking about. And I can see that there would be value to bringing in an expert, whether that's virtually, in person, and opening it up to the entire organization so that people can learn some of these things, how to advocate, what the actual laws say, without, like you said, with the focus group, I feel like what are they doing with the information, but it might put people with disabilities on the spot to have to speak, for the community. But if it's a learning session where everybody there is learning, I think that can be powerful as well.
Yeah, I went to a Western History Association conference, and I learned that there's a whole genre of writing about disability history. So there's a lot of scholarship out there, and I like the idea that you mentioned, bringing in a consultant, someone who has a disability, who is trained in this, who can, talk to your organization, your game plan.
The last question I have here is for each of you, being in different fields, but can you speak to how your identity intersects with your disability in the workplace and in your social life, and how that affects your experience?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. Can you speak to how your identities intersect with your disability in the workplace as well as your personal lives? For instance, how you work with Tri-City and such.
So with my background is in photography, and how my cancer was detected was through a photograph. So that already just kind of intersects with my career as a whole. But also the moment I got more confident with building my own brand, storytelling, things of that sort, I have also created the elevator pitch that, in short, will let people know similarly, like, I'm a photographer, but I cannot see you in my right eye. Normally it's a conversation starter as a whole. Oh my gosh, what happened? But normally that's how you can start telling the story, but not in a way of still being traumatized by it, still feeling victimized by it. So for me, I'm able to still intertwine it in the ways of, it's how I see you, it's how I see life differently, it's how I'm seeing this event that I'm attending differently, it's how I'm watching this movie differently. So I am able to make it a elevator pitch that is also a conversation starter, because of how my diagnosis came about.
So I'm a former educator and writer, and I feel like that really influences the way that I communicate my message about what it's like living with MS. So I create learning opportunities for my community. I'm constantly doing live sessions with different specialists, different organizations, geared towards people with MS. And I think as a woman specifically, as we talked about earlier, in medical systems, sometimes, research has showed that we are often dismissed and ignored. And so I think, people always ask me, well, why aren't you focusing on men with disability, with MS? And it's not that I don't see value in supporting them in their journeys as well, but I think that there's a specific challenges that women face, both when it comes to medical systems, but also the way that we navigate our relationships and the role that we play in families and, being mothers and caregivers and all these sort of things that require a very unique positioning and message. And so I'm always, trying to educate the women in my community, but also I'm a writer, so I'm blogging, and I think that's kind of where the idea for like scripting and language and how to advocate for yourself really comes from. Like, I created a guide where it's like, okay, if you're in these certain situations, here are things that you can say that can start that conversation. I think there's power in that, because a lot of times you don't know how to have those conversations. Sometimes they're uncomfortable, they can be difficult. Setting boundaries is hard, is something that I hear constantly, and it's required when you're living with a chronic illness to be able to say, no, I can't do that, or yes, I do need help, but not in that way. Help me like this. So
Yeah, I think the conversations are very important. It's interesting you said that, because as a teacher, relationships are key, and communication is key. So as a person with a communication disability, I have to work on that. So I bought all the books on communicating, the art of conversation, how to conversate with anyone, and I try to employ those things not only in my personal life but in my professional life as well.
Thank you so much. We have one more question from our trusty AV crew over here. I'm going to turn it over to Bracken.
Could you please go over the introduction again? That was the part of the audio that didn't work for the YouTube viewers. That audio just did not come through. So if you would go over the introduction again, that would be great.
did you hear? Go over the introduction again.
Okay, repeat the question.
He was asking if you could redo the introduction for us, Akira.
It didn't come through on YouTube. The audio didn't come through.
Okay. So, wait, like my full introduction, basically?
Yeah, the land acknowledgement and then introing our panelists. Our feed was cut a little early,
okay.
so
Gotcha,
there we go.
gotcha. All right, so. All right, Ilana Mbanza is the founder and CEO of Empower MS, a digital wellness company supporting people living with multiple sclerosis. After years of navigating chronic pain, medical gaslighting, and inconclusive tests, Ilana was diagnosed with MS in 2019. That experience transformed her into a fierce advocate for health equity, patient-centered care. And she now combines her personal insight and professional expertise to build tools that support wellness, self-advocacy, and community for those living with autoimmune conditions. And Dr. Anthony Cherry is also profoundly hard of hearing and a Ph.D. student studying American history at Oklahoma State University. Anthony focuses on the American West War Society, and his current research interests include radical social, political, and education reform movements in Oklahoma history. In embracing his hearing challenges, he teaches history at Holland Hall School in Tulsa, and before that, he taught at Booker T. Washington High School. And he's a writer and board member for Tri-City Collective and a media correspondent for Focus Black Oklahoma. And myself, I am Zakir Nayar Muhammad. I am a childhood eye cancer survivor and a disability advocate, while empowering others to use storytelling and media to amplify marginalized voices. I have a book that is called Seeing Life Through a Different Lens. I have a TED Talk called Seeing Life from a Different Lens. I have a podcast called See Life Different, which is all about empowering disability justice, racial equity, and healing through creativity. And I also am working on telling the stories of other retinoblastoma survivors, which is the name of my childhood eye cancer. So, and I think I want to use that time to thank the panelists for having this amazing conversation, for Real Talk, and for Tri-City Collective, Pursue Films, and Oklahoma Humanities for making this possible. And without your dedication, this platform for connecting and understanding would not be possible. And thank you to our audiences for your time and your question, and for being here, and for choosing to watch it and watch the replay. And your presence is definitely a step toward a brighter future and more equitable and inclusive community. And Real Talk happens every third Saturday of the month, unless it's on a holiday. So be sure to check us out for the next month for another powerful discussion. And be sure to listen live to our correspondents' latest segments on Focus Black Oklahoma every third Sunday. Until then, stay safe, stay connected, stay healthy, and continue to be an advocate and ally.